I watched from my living room window as a massive orange snowplow barreled down Maple Ridge Drive at 6 in the morning, its blades scraping against the asphalt with a sound like nails on a chalkboard. The thing that made my blood run cold wasn't just the ungodly hour or the noise. It was November 15th, and there wasn't a single snowflake in sight across our entire Burlington, Vermont neighborhood. My wife Zara had been working in our front yard garden since August, carefully cultivating and documenting 17 different varieties of native New England plant species for her doctoral dissertation at the University of Vermont. 3 months of meticulous work, daily measurements, soil samples, photographic documentation, and handwritten observations were all carefully organized in clearly marked research plots across our front lawn. The snowplow didn't slow down. I bolted out the front door in my pajamas and bare feet, waving my arms like a madman. The driver, some kid who couldn't have been older than 20, had earbuds in and was staring at his phone mounted on the dashboard. The blade caught the first of Zara's research markers, a carefully painted wooden stake marking her specimen of Chelone glabra, and ripped it straight out of the ground. Then it hit the first plot. "Stop, stop, stop," I screamed, my voice raw in the cold morning air. The blade tore through 3 months of research in approximately 12 seconds. Soil samples that had been carefully collected and labeled were scattered across the street. Plant specimens that Zara had been documenting daily were uprooted and mixed with fallen leaves, creating an indistinguishable mess of organic matter. The wooden frames she'd built to protect certain specimens splintered like toothpicks under the weight of the plow. The driver finally noticed me in his rearview mirror and slammed on the brakes. He pulled out one earbud and rolled down the window. "What's your problem, dude?" he asked, looking at me like I was the crazy one. "You just destroyed months of botanical research," I shouted, pointing at the carnage. "Who told you to plow leaves in November?" He shrugged and held up a work order on a clipboard. "HOA lady called me at 5:30 this morning, said it was an emergency. She wanted all the fall leaves cleared before some inspection today." I felt my heart sink into my stomach. The HOA. Of course, it was the HOA. Our neighborhood's homeowner association had been a thorn in our side since we moved to Burlington 3 years ago. The president, a woman named Patricia Huntington, had made it her personal mission to ensure that every single home on Maple Ridge Drive adhered to her vision of suburban perfection. She'd sent us violation notices for everything from leaving our garbage cans out 15 minutes past the designated pickup time to having the wrong shade of white on our fence posts. But this was different. This was destruction of actual academic research. "I need your name and the company you work for," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Look, man, I just do what I'm told. The lady said it was approved by the HOA board and everything." "Your name," I repeated. He sighed and handed me a business card. "Trevor's Landscaping and Snow Removal." "I'm Trevor." The front door of our house slammed open, and Zara came running out in her bathrobe. Her dark hair was still messy from sleep, but the look on her face when she saw the destruction was one I'd never forget. It was like watching someone witness a car accident in slow motion. "No," she whispered, walking toward the street. "No, no, 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 no." She dropped to her knees in the middle of the mess, picking up a destroyed specimen of Maianthemum canadense that she'd been documenting for its unusual flowering pattern. The roots were torn, the stems crushed, the carefully tagged identification marker snapped in half. "Zara, I'm so sorry," I started, but she wasn't listening. She stood up slowly, her hands shaking, soil falling from her fingers. When she turned to look at me, there were tears streaming down her face. "My research," she said quietly. Zach, that was my entire dissertation. 3 months of daily documentation. I needed 4 months of continuous data. I was almost done. Trevor shifted uncomfortably in his truck. Listen, if the HOA said to clear the leaves, I clear the leaves. That's what they pay me for. You were supposed to plow snow, not run over research plots. Zara shouted at him, her voice breaking. Lady, I don't know what to tell you. I got a call, I got a work order, I did the job. I put my hand on Zara's shoulder. Go inside and document everything. Take pictures, make a list of what was destroyed. I'm going to call Patricia right now. Zara nodded numbly and pulled out her phone, starting to photograph the damage with shaking hands. Trevor used the opportunity to put his truck in reverse. Where do you think you're going? I asked. I finished the job. The rest of the street doesn't have any weird garden stuff in front of the houses. Stay right there. The police might want to talk to you about property damage. Trevor's eyes widened. The police? Come on, man. The HOA called me. I was just doing my job. You destroyed thousands of dollars worth of research. Stay put. I didn't actually know if the police would consider this a criminal matter, but I needed Trevor to stick around. I pulled out my phone and dialed Patricia's number. It rang 4 times before she answered, her voice already dripping with irritation. Zach Brennan, do you have any idea what time it is? It's 6:15 in the morning, Patricia. The same time you apparently called a snowplow to destroy my wife's botanical research. There was a pause. I did no such thing. I called Trevor's Landscaping to clear the excessive leaf debris from Maple Ridge Drive. The leaves were creating an eyesore and potentially blocking storm drains. We're in the middle of a residential street, Patricia. The storm drains are fine, and you didn't just clear leaves. Your contractor drove a snowplow blade through clearly marked research plots on our property. Those unsightly wooden frames and stakes have been an ongoing violation for months, Zach. I've sent you multiple notices about maintaining appropriate front yard aesthetics according to our community guidelines. My jaw clenched so hard I thought my teeth might crack. Those weren't decorations, Patricia. They were part of my wife's doctoral research at UVM. 3 months of work. Gone. Well, perhaps your wife should conduct her research on university property rather than using her front lawn as some kind of makeshift laboratory. This is a residential neighborhood with standards. Our property, Patricia, our front lawn, we can use it however we want within reason. Actually, according to the covenants, conditions, and restrictions you signed when you purchased your home, all front yard modifications must be approved by the HOA board. I have no record of any approval for wooden frames, stakes, or research plots. I took a deep breath, trying to control my anger. We're going to sue the HOA for damages. This was deliberate destruction of property. Patricia's laugh was sharp and humorless. Good luck with that, Zach. The HOA has comprehensive liability insurance and a legal team on retainer. Meanwhile, you and your wife are still in violation of Section 8, Paragraph 4 of the community bylaws regarding front yard appearance. I expect those wooden frames and that mess to be cleaned up by 5 p.m. today, or you'll be receiving a fine of $100 per day until compliance is achieved. She hung up before I could respond. I stood there in my bare feet on the cold pavement, watching my wife photograph the ruins of her research, and felt completely helpless. We'd moved to this neighborhood because it was close to the university and seemed quiet and safe. The HOA had seemed like a minor inconvenience at the time, just another part of homeownership. We had no idea it would turn into this nightmare. Zara came over to me, her phone full of photographs. I got pictures of everything. The destroyed specimens, the scattered soil samples, the broken frames. But Zach, I don't know if I can salvage any of this. The specimens are mixed together, the labeling system is destroyed, and without continuous daily documentation from the same plants, the data is worthless for my dissertation. We'll figure this out, I said, pulling her into a hug. I promise we'll make this right. My committee expects a progress report in 2 weeks. I was going to show them 4 months of continuous observation. Now I have nothing. Trevor cleared his throat from his truck. So, can I go? I pulled away from Zara and walked over to his window. Give me copies of everything. The work order Patricia sent you, any emails, any texts, everything. I don't have to give you anything, man. You want the police involved, because I can call them right now. Property damage, trespassing, destruction of academic research materials. I'm sure they'd love to hear all about it. Trevor hesitated, then pulled out his phone. Fine. Give me your number. I'll forward you the emails and text the work order photo. I gave him my number and watched as he sent everything through. The work order was simple and damning. It read, clear all leaf debris and unsightly yard installations from Maple Ridge Drive. Authorized by Patricia Huntington, HOA President. Time sensitive, complete before 8 a.m. Unsightly yard installations, I muttered. She specifically told you to destroy the research plots. She said clear debris, man. That's what I did. After Trevor finally drove away, Zara and I spent the next 3 hours trying to salvage what we could. Most of the specimens were too damaged to be useful. The soil samples were hopelessly mixed together. The photographic documentation she'd done was still intact on her computer, but without the corresponding physical specimens and continued observation, the data was incomplete and potentially useless for her dissertation. By 9 a.m., our neighbors started emerging from their homes. Mrs. Chen from across the street came over with coffee and a sympathetic expression. I heard the noise this morning, she said. I couldn't believe they were plowing in November. What happened to your garden? Zara explained the situation while I continued trying to sort through the wreckage. Mrs. Chen listened with growing horror. Patricia called a snowplow. For leaves? That's insane. She's been getting worse lately, you know. Last month she tried to find the Reynolds family because their Halloween decorations were still up on November 1st. November 1st. People barely finish their candy by then. Has anyone ever successfully challenged her? I asked. Mrs. Chen shook her head. Most people just pay the fines and comply. It's easier than fighting. The HOA has lawyers and fighting them costs money. But this is different. She destroyed actual research. Another neighbor, Frank Douglas, joined us. He was a retired attorney who'd lived on Maple Ridge Drive for 20 years. I heard what happened, he said. Patricia is out of control. She's been on a power trip ever since she became president 2 years ago. Can we sue? Zara asked. I had 3 months of irreplaceable data. My dissertation timeline is completely destroyed. Frank scratched his chin thoughtfully. You can absolutely sue. The question is whether it's worth it. HOA litigation can drag on for years. But in this case, you might have a strong argument for both property damage and interference with academic research. The fact that Patricia specifically ordered the removal of your research materials could be considered intentional destruction. What should we do first? I asked. Document everything, which it looks like you're already doing. Then send a formal demand letter to the HOA board requesting compensation for damages. Include the cost of your wife's time, the value of the destroyed materials, and any potential academic consequences. If they refuse, you file suit. And if we lose? Zara asked quietly. Then you're out legal fees and the HOA will probably fine you for all the violations Patricia can dream up. But honestly, I think you have a solid case, especially if you can quantify the academic damage. After Frank left, I helped Zara create a comprehensive damage assessment. We estimated her time at her standard research assistant rate of $25 per hour. 3 months of daily work, roughly 2 hours per day for 90 days, came to $4,500 in labor. The materials, plants, soil testing kits, and custom frames totaled another $800. But the real damage was the setback to her dissertation. Zara's advisor, Dr. Helen Morrison, arrived around noon. She'd driven straight from the UVM campus after Zara called her in tears. Dr. Morrison was a stern woman in her 60s who'd published extensively on New England native plant species. She walked through the destruction slowly, her face growing darker with each step. "This is unconscionable," she finally said. "Zara, you had some of the cleanest, most thorough field documentation I've seen from a graduate student in years. This research was groundbreaking, particularly your observations on the Chelone glabra flowering patterns in response to the unusual weather this fall. Can I salvage any of it?" Zara asked. Dr. Morrison shook her head slowly. "Not for the purposes of your original dissertation proposal. The core of your research required continuous observation of the same specimens over a complete growing cycle. You're missing the final month. The data is incomplete." Zara's face crumbled. "So I have to start over?" "Not necessarily. You could pivot your dissertation to focus on a different aspect of your research. You have 3 months of solid data. That's not nothing. Or you could extend your program and restart the observational study next spring." "Which would delay my graduation by a year," Zara said flatly. "Yes." I put my arm around Zara's shoulders. "What if we could hold the HOA financially responsible for the extension? Make them pay for the additional year of tuition and fees?" Dr. Morrison raised an eyebrow. "That would be a significant sum. UVM's graduate program isn't cheap. Neither is destroying someone's doctoral research." After Dr. Morrison left, Zara and I sat on our front steps, surveying the mess. It was nearly 1 p.m., and Patricia's deadline of 5 p.m. to clean everything up was looming. "I'm not cleaning it up," Zara said suddenly. "Not until we have everything documented and photographed from every possible angle. If she wants to fine us, let her fine us." "Agreed," I said. "We need to be strategic about this." I spent the next hour researching Vermont property law and HOA regulations. What I found was both encouraging and infuriating. Vermont law did give HOAs significant power to enforce community standards, but that power wasn't unlimited. HOAs couldn't violate state law, couldn't engage in discriminatory practices, and couldn't act in bad faith or with malicious intent. The key question was whether Patricia's actions constituted bad faith or malicious intent. The fact that she'd specifically ordered the removal of unsightly yard installations suggested she knew exactly what she was targeting. I called a law firm in downtown Burlington that specialized in property disputes. The receptionist connected me to an attorney named James Walsh. "Tell me what happened," Walsh said after I explained why I was calling. I laid out the entire story. The research plots, the multiple violation notices Patricia had sent, the early morning snowplow, the destroyed research, and Patricia's comment about the unsightly installations. Walsh was quiet for a moment after I finished. "How much are we talking in damages?" "Labor and materials are about $5,000, but my wife might have to extend her doctoral program by a year. That's another $40,000 in tuition and fees, plus her lost income during that year." Walsh whistled. "So we're looking at significant damages. The question is proving that the HOA acted with malicious intent rather than just aggressive enforcement of community standards." "She sent a snowplow in November to clear leaves," I pointed out. Who does that? Someone who wanted to destroy your wife's research under the guise of community maintenance, Walsh said. But we'd need to prove that. Do you have documentation of previous disputes with the HOA president? 3 years' worth of violation notices. Some of them are ridiculous. She once cited us for having the wrong shade of white paint on our fence posts. Save everything. I'd like to review all the correspondence between you and the HOA. If we can establish a pattern of harassment, it strengthens your case significantly. Can you come to my office tomorrow morning? We scheduled an appointment for 9 a.m. the next day. As I hung up, I noticed a white SUV pulling up in front of our house. Patricia Huntington climbed out, wearing designer sunglasses and carrying a leather portfolio. She was exactly what you'd picture when someone said, HOA president. Mid-50s, perfectly styled blonde hair, expensive casual clothing that probably cost more than our monthly mortgage payment. She approached our property line with the confidence of someone who believed the entire neighborhood belonged to her personally. Mr. Brennan, she said coolly. It's nearly 2 p.m. and I see you haven't begun cleaning up this mess. This mess is evidence, I replied. We're documenting everything for our lawsuit. Patricia's smile was thin and sharp. Lawsuit? How ambitious. I hope you have deep pockets. The HOA's legal counsel charges $400 an hour. And I hope your liability insurance is current, I shot back, because you deliberately destroyed months of doctoral research. I did no such thing. I ordered the removal of covenant violations from community property. Our front lawn isn't community property, Patricia. It belongs to us. She opened her portfolio and pulled out a document. Actually, according to the property survey filed with your deed, the first 15 feet from the curb is technically part of the community easement. The HOA maintains rights to access and modify that space for community beautification and maintenance purposes. I felt my stomach drop. I'd never heard anything about an easement before. Patricia saw my expression and her smile widened. Did you not read your closing documents, Mr. Brennan? The easement is clearly marked. Your wife's research plots were located entirely within HOA-controlled space. That's ridiculous, Zara said, coming to stand beside me. We've lived here for 3 years and nobody ever mentioned an easement. Ignorance of the covenants doesn't negate them, dear. Now, you have until 5 p.m. to remove all debris from the easement or the fines begin. $100 per day adds up quickly. She turned to leave, but I called after her. Why did you do this, Patricia? What did we ever do to you? She paused and looked back at us. For just a moment, I saw something cold and calculating in her expression. This neighborhood has standards, Mr. Brennan. When people like you move in and start treating their property like some kind of agricultural experiment, it affects everyone's home values. I've worked too hard to maintain this community's reputation to let it be dragged down by unsightly research plots and unkempt gardens. Unsightly research plots. Zara's voice was shaking with fury. I was studying native New England plants, indigenous species that belong in this ecosystem. They looked like weeds, Patricia said dismissively, and they attracted insects. Mrs. Morrison next door complained about bees. Bees are pollinators. They're supposed to be here. Patricia waved her hand as if swatting away an annoying fly. 5 p.m., Mrs. Brennan. Clean it up or pay the fines. Your choice. After she drove away, Zara turned to me with tears of frustration in her eyes. An easement. How can there be an easement we never knew about? I don't know, but I'm going to find out. I'm calling our real estate attorney. Our real estate attorney, Susan Mercer, had handled our home purchase 3 years ago. She sounded confused when I described the easement Patricia had mentioned. I don't remember any 15-foot easement on your property, she said. Let me pull up your closing documents." I waited while she searched through her files. The silence stretched out for almost 5 minutes. "Zach, I'm looking at your property survey right now. There's no community easement marked. The property line goes right to the curb, same as every other house on that street. Where did the HOA president say this easement was documented?" She said it was filed with our deed. "I filed your deed personally. There's no easement. She's lying to you." A surge of vindication rushed through me. "Can you send me a certified copy of our property survey?" "I'll email it to you right now and send a certified hard copy via courier. You should have it within 2 hours." When I told Zara what Susan said, she actually laughed. It was a slightly hysterical sound, but it was better than crying. "She just made up an easement?" Zara asked. "She thought she could just lie and we'd believe her. She probably assumed we didn't keep our closing documents or wouldn't know how to check." What an absolute nightmare of a human being. The property survey arrived by courier at 3:30 p.m. It clearly showed our property line extending directly to the curb with no easement of any kind. I made several copies and sent one to James Walsh, our attorney. At 4:45 p.m., Patricia sent a text message to my phone. "Final warning. Clean up your violation or face fines." I responded with a photo of the property survey. "There is no easement. You lied. Our property extends to the curb. You ordered the destruction of research materials on our private property. See you in court." She didn't respond. That evening, Zara and I worked together to document every single violation notice Patricia had sent us over the past 3 years. There were 47 of them. Some were legitimate, like the time we'd forgotten to bring in our trash cans for 2 days. But most were absurd. She'd cited us for having Christmas lights up on December 26th, for having a garden hose visible from the street, for parking our car in our driveway at an angle she deemed improper, for having a package delivered and left on our porch for 3 hours before we got home from work, for our grass being a 1/4 inch too long according to HOA standards. Looking at the pattern, it was clear that Patricia had been targeting us for years. The question was why. "You think she just doesn't like us?" Zara asked as we sorted through the notices. "I think she doesn't like anyone she can't control," I said. "Frank mentioned she's been getting worse since she became president. Maybe it's a power thing." "Well, she picked the wrong people to mess with this time." Our appointment with James Walsh the next morning was productive. He reviewed all our documentation with a careful eye, taking notes on a yellow legal pad. "This is good," he said. "Really good. The pattern of harassment is clear. The false claim about the easement is particularly damning. That could potentially be considered fraud." "So we have a case?" I asked. "You have an excellent case. Here's what I recommend. We send a formal demand letter to the HOA board, not just Patricia. We outline the damages, provide evidence of the destruction, and demand full compensation plus an agreement that they'll cease all harassing behavior. We give them 10 days to respond." "And if they don't respond or refuse?" Zara asked. "Then we file suit. Based on everything you've shown me, I'd recommend suing for actual damages, which we can document, plus punitive damages for the malicious destruction of academic research." Vermont courts take education seriously. The fact that this was doctoral research at a state university might work in our favor. "How much are we talking?" I asked. Walsh tapped his pen on the desk. "Actual damages. We can document around $50,000 if we include the cost of extending your wife's program. Punitive damages are harder to predict, but given the malicious nature of the act and the false claims about the easement, we could argue for 3 to 5 times the actual damages. So potentially 200 to 300,000. Zara's eyes widened. "That much? Punitive damages are meant to punish and deter bad behavior. A small fine wouldn't deter someone like Patricia. She needs to understand there are real consequences for abusing her authority. We agreed to move forward with the demand letter. Walsh said he'd have it drafted and sent by the end of the week. In the meantime, we had to deal with Patricia's threats about daily fines. We decided to clean up the destroyed research, but we documented everything first. I took videos showing the exact state of the property, the destroyed specimens, the scattered materials. Zara created a detailed written description of every lost piece of research. Only after we had everything thoroughly documented did we finally clean up the mess. It took an entire weekend. Zara worked with tears running down her face, carefully collecting what few salvageable specimens remained. Most of them went into a special storage container in our garage, preserved for potential use as evidence. The following Monday, we received a formal notice from the HOA. We were being fined $200 for failing to clean up by the 5 p.m. deadline the previous Friday. Never mind that we'd cleaned everything up over the weekend. Patricia wanted her pound of flesh. I scanned the fine notice and emailed it to Walsh. He responded within an hour. Perfect. Add it to the demand letter. She's continuing the pattern of harassment even after being informed of the lawsuit. This helps us. The demand letter went out on Thursday. Walsh had crafted it beautifully. It outlined every detail of the destruction, included copies of the work order showing Patricia's deliberate instructions, referenced the false easement claim, and attached the property survey proving she'd lied. It demanded $50,000 in actual damages, a written apology, immediate cessation of all fines and violation notices, and Patricia's resignation as HOA president. We gave them 10 days to respond. The response came in 7 days, and it wasn't what we expected. Instead of the HOA board responding, we received a letter from their attorney, a firm called Morrison & Associates based in Burlington. The letter was dismissive and threatening in equal measure. It claimed the HOA had acted within its rights to maintain community standards, that we had repeatedly violated community covenants, and that our lawsuit was frivolous. They denied all liability and threatened to countersue for legal fees and continued violation fines if we proceeded with litigation. Walsh read the letter and actually smiled. This is exactly what we wanted. How is that what we wanted? I asked. Because they're doubling down instead of settling. That means when we win, and we will win, the damages will be significant. They had a chance to resolve this reasonably. They chose not to. That shows bad faith. So we're filing the lawsuit, Zara asked. We're filing the lawsuit, and I'm going to recommend we add a claim for intentional infliction of emotional distress. Your wife's reaction to seeing 3 months of doctoral research destroyed, that's documented in the photos and videos, correct? She was crying, I said. She could barely function for days afterward. That's emotional distress. And given that Patricia knew exactly what she was destroying, the intent is clear. The lawsuit was filed in Vermont Superior Court the following week. We sued both Patricia Huntington personally and the Maple Ridge HOA for property damage, intentional destruction of academic research, fraud regarding the easement claim, harassment, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. We asked for actual damages of $50,000, punitive damages of $250,000, attorney fees, and a permanent injunction preventing Patricia from serving in any HOA leadership role. The local news picked up the story 2 days after filing. A reporter from Burlington Free Press called me for comment. A University of Vermont doctoral student's research was destroyed when an HOA president allegedly ordered a snowplow to clear her front yard research plots, I told the reporter. We're seeking justice not just for the financial damages, but for the deliberate destruction of academic research. The story ran on the front page of the local section. By that afternoon, it had been picked up by regional news stations. By that evening, it was trending on social media. The narrative caught fire because it hit so many hot buttons. Overbearing HOAs, attacks on academic research, abuse of power, the David versus Goliath nature of homeowners fighting back against institutional authority. The fact that Zara was a sympathetic figure, a doctoral student studying native plants, made it even better. Within 24 hours, our story had been covered by national news outlets. I did interviews with 3 different television stations. Zara appeared on a local morning show to talk about her research and what had been lost. The public response was overwhelmingly supportive. Other people who'd had problems with HOAs started sharing their own horror stories. Legal experts weighed in, most of them agreeing that we had a strong case. A few HOA defenders tried to argue that community standards were important, but they were drowned out by the wave of anti-HOA sentiment. Patricia, for her part, remained silent. The HOA board issued a brief statement saying they were confident in their legal position and declined to comment on pending litigation. But behind the scenes, things were happening. Frank Douglas, our retired attorney neighbor, came over one evening with interesting news. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that several other HOA board members are furious with Patricia, he said. They had no idea she'd ordered the snowplow. She acted unilaterally without board approval. Isn't that against HOA rules? I asked. Absolutely. Major decisions like hiring contractors for non-emergency work are supposed to be board decisions. Patricia just did it on her own authority. So they might remove her, Zara asked hopefully. Better than that. I heard they're considering settling the lawsuit without her approval. The HOA's insurance company is apparently recommending they settle. They don't want this going to trial. That was encouraging news. But I also knew that insurance companies were notorious for dragging their feet and offering lowball settlements. Sure enough, 2 weeks later, we received a settlement offer through Walsh. The HOA's insurance company was willing to pay $15,000 in damages if we agreed to drop the lawsuit and sign a non-disclosure agreement. That's insulting, Zara said when Walsh told us about the offer. $15,000 doesn't even cover the cost of extending my program for a year. I agree, Walsh said. I recommend we reject it and proceed toward trial. The publicity is on our side and the evidence is strong. We can do much better. We rejected the settlement offer. The case moved forward through discovery. Walsh subpoenaed all of Patricia's emails and text messages related to the HOA and our property specifically. What we found was even more damning than we'd expected. Patricia had been complaining about Zara's research plots in private HOA board emails for 2 months before the snowplow incident. She'd called them unsightly, inappropriate, and detrimental to property values. Multiple board members had responded saying the plots looked fine and were actually rather nice. One board member, a woman named Jennifer, had specifically said she liked seeing native plants in the neighborhood. Patricia had responded to Jennifer's email with a message that said, "If you people won't support me in maintaining standards, I'll handle it myself." She'd sent that email 3 days before calling the snowplow. Walsh was practically gleeful when he read it. This is smoking gun evidence of premeditation. She explicitly said she'd handle it herself, then she ordered the destruction. The jury is going to eat this up. But there was more. In her text messages with friends outside the HOA, Patricia had made disparaging comments about Zara specifically. She'd called her a pretentious academic and said, "These university people think they're better than everyone else." "That's not evidence of anything illegal," Walsh cautioned. "But it shows her mindset. She had personal animosity toward your wife, and she acted on it by destroying her research." The discovery process also revealed something interesting about the HOA's finances. Patricia had been spending HOA funds without proper board approval for months. The snowplow wasn't the only unauthorized expense. She'd hired landscapers, paid for legal consultations, and even purchased new furniture for the HOA's small office space, all without board votes. "This is financial mismanagement at minimum," Walsh said. "Possibly embezzlement if we can show she personally benefited from any of these expenditures." I wasn't interested in pursuing criminal charges unless absolutely necessary. I just wanted compensation for what she'd done to Zara's research, and for Patricia to be removed from any position of authority over our lives. But the HOA board was interested, very interested. 3 months after we filed the lawsuit, the HOA board held an emergency meeting and voted unanimously to remove Patricia as president. They also voted to settle our lawsuit for the full amount we'd requested, $50,000 in actual damages, though they rejected the punitive damages claim. Walsh brought us the news with mixed feelings. $50,000 is good, it's what we can actually prove in damages, but I think we could get the punitive damages if we went to trial. "How long would a trial take?" Zara asked. "Probably another year, maybe longer if they appeal." Zara and I looked at each other. We'd been living with this stress for 3 months already. The idea of another year or more was exhausting. "What do you think?" I asked her. "I think I want it to be over," she said quietly. "I want to take the money, extend my program, and finish my research. I want to move on." I agreed. We accepted the settlement. The $50,000 was paid by the HOA's insurance company within 30 days. We used $40,000 to cover the cost of Zara extending her graduate program for 1 year and her lost income during that time. The remaining $10,000 went to legal fees and replacing the destroyed research materials. But we weren't quite done with Patricia yet. After she was removed as HOA president, we started hearing rumors around the neighborhood. Other homeowners came forward with their own stories of harassment and abuse of power. Mrs. Chen told us about a $1,000 fine Patricia had threatened her with for having a vegetable garden in her backyard, visible from the street. The Reynolds family showed us violation notices for having children's toys in their yard. Most damaging of all, Frank's investigation into the HOA finances revealed that Patricia had been billing personal expenses to the HOA. She'd charged restaurant meals, spa visits, and even a weekend trip to Montreal to the HOA's accounts, claiming they were business expenses related to HOA management. The HOA board filed a police report for embezzlement. The Burlington Police Department investigated and found evidence of over $12,000 in fraudulent charges over a 2-year period. Patricia was arrested on a Wednesday morning. I wasn't there to see it, but Frank was, and he gave me a detailed description. 2 police officers knocked on her door at 8 a.m. and placed her in handcuffs in front of her neighbors. She was charged with embezzlement, fraud, and misuse of community funds. The case went to trial 8 months later. Zara and I attended as spectators. We wanted to see justice done. The trial lasted 3 days. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence of Patricia's financial crimes. Her defense attorney tried to argue that the expenses were legitimate business costs, but the jury didn't buy it. Spa visits and personal restaurant meals weren't HOA business. They also brought up the destruction of Zara's research as evidence of Patricia's pattern of abusing her authority. While it wasn't directly related to the criminal charges, it painted a picture of someone who believed the rules didn't apply to her. The jury deliberated for 4 hours and found Patricia guilty on all counts. At sentencing, the judge was harsh. Patricia had shown no remorse, hadn't apologized to anyone she'd harmed, and had continued to maintain that she'd done nothing wrong. The judge sentenced her to 18 months in prison and ordered her to pay full restitution to the HOA for all embezzled funds. Zara and I watched as Patricia was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs. She didn't look at us, didn't look at anyone. She stared straight ahead with her jaw clenched, still defiant even in defeat. "Is it wrong that I feel satisfied seeing this?" Zara asked me quietly as we left the courthouse. "No," I said. "She destroyed months of your work and hurt a lot of people. She deserves to face consequences." The neighborhood changed after Patricia's removal. The new HOA president was a mild-mannered accountant named David who believed in following the rules, but also using common sense. He sent out a memo to all residents apologizing for Patricia's behavior and promising a fresh start. The ridiculous violation notices stopped. People started feeling comfortable using their properties the way they wanted. Mrs. Chen expanded her vegetable garden. The Reynolds family set up a playset in their backyard, and Zara started new research plots in our front yard. This time, she submitted a formal proposal to the HOA board first, even though she didn't legally need to. David approved it immediately and even sent her a note saying he thought it was wonderful to have native plant research happening in the neighborhood. Starting the research over was hard for Zara. She'd lost a year of her program timeline, and beginning from scratch meant long hours and meticulous documentation all over again. But she approached it with renewed determination. I watched her work through the spring and summer, carefully tending her specimens, taking daily measurements, photographing growth patterns. By August, she had 3 months of new data, and by November, she had a complete growing cycle documented. Her dissertation committee was impressed with the final work. Despite the setback, or perhaps because of it, her research was thorough and groundbreaking. She successfully defended her dissertation the following spring and graduated with her doctorate. At her graduation ceremony, as I watched her walk across the stage to receive her diploma, I thought about everything that had happened. The destroyed research, the lawsuit, Patricia's arrest and conviction, the settlement that made it possible for Zara to finish her work. It had been a long, difficult journey, but we'd fought back against injustice and won. Patricia had abused her power and destroyed something valuable, and she'd faced real consequences for it. The HOA had been reformed. Our neighborhood was better for it. After the ceremony, Zara and I went out to dinner with her parents and Dr. Morrison. Over champagne, Dr. Morrison raised her glass in a toast. "To Dr. Zara Laurent," she said, "who persevered through circumstances that would have defeated many others. Your research on native New England plant species will be a valuable contribution to the field." We clinked glasses, and Zara smiled. It was the first genuinely happy, unstressed smile I'd seen on her face in over a year. "Thank you," she said. "And thank you for standing by me when everything fell apart. I couldn't have done this without your support." "You did the work," Dr. Morrison said. "I just provided guidance." Your determination to start over and complete the research, despite the setback, shows the kind of resilience that makes great scientists. Later that evening, after everyone had gone home, Zara and I sat on our front porch, looking out at the new research plots she'd carefully tended for the past year. The wooden frames and stakes were still there, marking different specimens. The plants were healthy and thriving. "I still can't believe all of that happened," Zara said. "Sometimes it feels like a bad dream." "It was real," I said, "but it's over now. Patricia is in prison. You finished your research. We won." "We did win, didn't we? Completely." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "I'm glad we didn't just give up and clean everything up when she first demanded it. I'm glad we fought back." "Me too." The sun was setting over Maple Ridge Drive, casting long shadows across the carefully maintained lawns and houses. Our neighborhood looked peaceful and normal, just like any other suburban street in Burlington, Vermont. But it was different now. Better. The HOA still existed, still enforced reasonable community standards, still made sure people didn't paint their houses purple or leave broken cars on their lawns. But the reign of terror was over. People could live their lives, use their properties, and pursue their work without fear of arbitrary punishment from a power-hungry president. A few weeks after Zara's graduation, we received a letter from Jennifer, the former board member who'd stood up to Patricia about the research plots. She'd left the board shortly after Patricia was removed, exhausted by the drama. Her letter thanked us for standing up to Patricia and mentioned that our lawsuit had given several other homeowners the courage to fight back against their own HOA problems. She'd heard from people across Vermont who'd been inspired by our story. "You made a difference," Jennifer wrote. "Not just for yourselves, but for a lot of people who felt powerless against HOA overreach. Thank you for being brave enough to fight." Zara pinned the letter to our refrigerator. Every time I saw it, I felt a small sense of pride. We hadn't set out to be activists or change the world. We just wanted justice for the destruction of Zara's research. But in the process, we'd challenged a system that too often goes unchecked. The settlement money was long since spent, used for exactly what it was intended for, allowing Zara to complete her education despite the setback Patricia had caused. But the real victory wasn't financial. It was knowing that Patricia could never hurt anyone else the way she'd hurt us. It was seeing the neighborhood flourish under new, reasonable leadership. It was watching Zara walk across that stage with her doctorate, the research that Patricia tried to destroy now complete and recognized. 6 months after Zara's graduation, we got news that Patricia had been released from prison early for good behavior. She'd served 10 months of her 18-month sentence. We heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she'd moved to a different state, starting over somewhere no one knew her history. I hoped she'd learned something from the experience. I hoped she'd realized that power comes with responsibility, that authority isn't a weapon to wield against people you don't like, that actions have consequences. But honestly, I didn't spend much time thinking about Patricia anymore. She'd taken up enough of our mental energy. We had better things to focus on. Zara had accepted a postdoctoral research position at UVM, continuing her work on native plant species. I'd gotten a promotion at my job. We were talking about starting a family. Life was good. One evening in late fall, almost exactly 2 years after the Snowplow incident, Zara and I were working in the front yard. She was collecting the final samples from that year's research plots, and I was helping her organize and label everything. A car slowed down as it passed our house. A woman rolled down her window and called out to us. "Excuse me, are you the couple who sued the HOA?" My guard went up immediately, but Zara smiled and walked over to the car. "We are," she said. "Can I help you?" "I just wanted to thank you," the woman said. "I live 3 streets over, and our HOA president has been making our lives miserable for years. I saw your story on the news, and it gave me the courage to challenge some of his decisions. We're in the process of voting him out now. Your case set a precedent in our community. So thank you." She drove away before we could respond, but Zara was beaming. "We set a precedent," she said. "That's pretty cool." "Pretty cool," I agreed. As we finished collecting the samples and headed inside, I looked back at the research plots one more time. They'd been destroyed once, but they'd grown back, stronger, more carefully documented, more valued. Sometimes that's how justice works. Something gets destroyed and you have a choice. You can give up, accept the loss, move on quietly. Or you can fight back, rebuild, and make sure what happened to you doesn't happen to anyone else. We chose to fight. And we won. The HOA still sends us the occasional notice, but they're reasonable now. Reminders about trash pickup schedules, announcements about community events, requests for input on neighborhood improvements. Nothing threatening, nothing arbitrary, nothing designed to punish or control. That's how it should be. HOAs can serve a legitimate purpose when they're run by reasonable people with the community's best interests at heart. But they can also become tools of oppression when power-hungry individuals like Patricia take control. Our story had a happy ending, but not everyone's does. There are still homeowners across America fighting their own battles against unreasonable HOAs. There are still HOA presidents abusing their authority, threatening fines, destroying property, making people's lives miserable over trivial violations. But maybe our story gives some of those people hope. Maybe it shows them that fighting back is possible, that justice can prevail, that you don't have to accept abuse just because someone has a title and a copy of the community bylaws. If nothing else, our experience taught me one valuable lesson: documentation is everything. We won our case because we documented everything. Every violation notice, every photograph, every email, every text message. When Patricia lied about the easement, we had the property survey to prove she was wrong. When she claimed she had authority to destroy the research plots, we had evidence showing she'd acted without board approval. In any dispute with an HOA or any authority figure, document everything. Save everything. Take photographs, make copies, keep records. You never know when you might need them. Zara's research plots are flourishing now in their third year of continuous observation. She's expanded her work to include collaboration with other researchers across New England, studying climate change impacts on native plant species. The research that Patricia tried to destroy has grown into something bigger and more important than either of us imagined. And every time I see those carefully marked plots, those wooden frames and stakes that once were considered unsightly, I think about how close we came to losing it all. How different things would be if we just cleaned up that mess and paid the fines like Patricia demanded. But we didn't. We stood our ground. We fought back. And we made sure Patricia faced consequences for what she'd done. Justice isn't always fast, and it isn't always easy. But when you have truth on your side, when you have evidence and determination and the courage to stand up to bullies, justice is possible. Our neighborhood learned that lesson the hard way. But it was a lesson worth learning. As I write this now, sitting on our front porch on a cool autumn evening, watching Zara work in her research plots while the sun sets behind our house, I feel grateful. Grateful that we had the resources to fight back. Grateful for the attorney who believed in our case. Grateful for the neighbors who supported us. Grateful for the justice system that, despite its flaws, ultimately held Patricia accountable. But mostly I'm grateful for Zara. For her resilience, her determination, her refusal to let Patricia's actions destroy her dreams. She could have given up, could have switched to a different research topic, could have let the setback defeat her. Instead, she started over and finished what she started. That's the real victory. Not the settlement money, not Patricia's conviction, not even the reforms to the HOA. The real victory is that Zara finished her research. She earned her doctorate. She's doing the work she loves, making real contributions to our understanding of New England's ecosystem. Patricia tried to destroy that, and she failed. The snowplow that destroyed the first research plots is long gone, probably scraping snow off some other street right now in the heart of winter. Trevor's landscaping is still in business, though I doubt Trevor takes work orders from HOA presidents without asking a lot more questions these days. The HOA still exists, still manages the neighborhood, still collects dues and enforces standards. But it's different now. Better, more accountable, more reasonable. And we're still here, in the house we bought 3 years ago, living our lives, doing our work, no longer looking over our shoulders for violation notices or worrying about arbitrary fines. That's what victory looks like. Not dramatic or flashy, just quiet peace and the freedom to live without harassment. I'll take it.